As much as I love to talk about policy, it's even more fun to be able to create policy. And good policy must have as one of its steps assembling the evidence. Just like a research project, you would never start your research without doing literature and without looking at what research has been done before on your topic, knowing those pieces of research well, and knowing what their outcomes were. Likewise, if you're doing a policy analysis, you want to map your evidence. This is a little bit different than your literature review, but in many ways, it is the same. You need to know what the existing policies are, and if there are programs that already address your problem. Once you've identified your problem, you can then look for organizations, or if you're in a healthcare facility departments, or if you're in the government, you can look for agencies within government that already address either the entire problem or a part of it. You need to know the political environment. And what I mean by this is you need to know if people are in favor or if your policy is going to be well received, or if you are trying to create policy around a topic that is going to get a lot of pushback. You need to know how the bureaucracies work that would need to implement any of your proposed options. And since you shouldn't start out with your proposed options from the beginning and should build to them, you may not know this yet. But before you get to the end, before you put this policy forward, you are going to need to know how do the bureaucracies work that would need to implement the proposed options. You can't propose, well, you could, but it would not be wise. You should not propose any policy that cannot be feasibly done. And then, what are the criteria you're going to use to evaluate the options? And who's going to evaluate them? I want to use an example to walk through this process. And here's my example. Nurses volunteer. But what do we do when we have too many patients for too few nurses in a disaster? My problem would then be that the majority of nurses responding to disaster were not professional responders. There are 4 types of volunteers: professional responders, trained responders, citizen volunteers, and spontaneous unaffiliated volunteers. Our goal is to identify the evidence for effective use of volunteers during disaster. We know that disaster response depends on volunteers who are trained and organized through programs such as DMATs, the Medical Reserve Corps, the American Red Cross, or state volunteer emergency response teams. What you don't want is you don't want people who are not trained and prepared to go out into a disaster situation. And the reason you don't want this is because it takes the time of the trained responders away from patient care and focused on the untrained responders. The untrained responders, while at times may be necessary, ideally, that's not who you want to depend on during an actual disaster. However, you need to be aware that you are going to take a lot of pressure, usually from the media and from politicians, to take these untrained responders, even though you know it's going to make you less effective in the field. So start with what you know. Look for what seems obvious to you. Why were you selected to do this analysis? And for a lot of young policymakers, a lot of young nurses that are having their first foray into policy, they want to know, why me? And all of these insecurities will rush through your head, and you need to swat them away just like they were a fly. And you need to do that because nobody's going to ask you to create a policy if they think you're not qualified. Because ultimately somebody up your chain is going to sign off on that policy, and they're not going to want something that they think is going to make them look bad or the department look bad or be harmful. So what they're going to do is pick people that they think can do it. So you need to go into it with confidence. Begin by telling yourself that you would not have been asked if someone did not think you were qualified. Write notes to yourself about what you want to do, and don't panic about the scope of the project. And then take stock. Locate relevant resources or sources that will be useful to you. Gain and maintain access to the sources. And this is when it's important to remember that sources are not just things that you will find in the literature, but they're people, or they're other agencies. They're people that share an interest in the work you're doing, and they can point you in the direction. It's always important, if you're in policy, to remember you want to make friends, and especially if you're doing something like disaster policy, you want to make friends because people need to have seen your face and heard your voice and know who you are long before you go asking them for information or for help. Accumulate background information as leverage. The more you have, the more useful it will be to you. And always protect your own political credibility. Whatever you do in this policy analysis will follow you. If you compromise your integrity or your credibility, people will not soon forget. There are 4 branches of the evidence tree. The 4 branches are people leading to documents. So there are those people that have been around a long time, and they are going to have what is referred to as institutional memory. They're going to be able to tell you what has been written, what was created, and what was never published, going back years. And a lot of these people are pack rats. They're going to have kept copies of the documents, or they're going to know somebody that has them and how you can locate them. There are people leading to people. And these are the people that may not know the answers you want or be able to help you, but they know other people that will, and they can make introductions for you. There are documents leading to other documents. One of the things that you learn early on as a graduate student is that if you look at the reference list in your research articles, you will find a lot more articles in that reference list on your topic. Documents can lead to documents in policy also. If you look at any GAO report, you will find an extensive reference list of documents that they review. Likewise, in any CRS report or almost any policy report, you're going to find a list of references. That is documents leading to documents. And then there are documents leading to people. All of the documents have somebody that was either the editor or the writer or is cited in the document. Those documents can lead you to those people, and those people can then be resources for you. So you have to shake all the branches of this tree if you want to find all of your information. So people leading to documents. It's always a good idea when you talk to people to ask them what else you should read. Don't be afraid to look at the books on people's bookshelves. Lots of academics like to talk about their books and are happy that you're interested. So show an interest in what they have. Always have a flash drive with you. Some people will share information before you leave, and they'll be happy to share documents with you on a flash drive. But if you ask them to take the extra step of emailing it to you, they're busy. And while they may have good intentions of doing it, they may forget. And when you have to ask repeatedly, then you're just going to be a pest. So it's easier to always have that flash drive with you. And if they're willing to share, they can give you a document right then if they have easy access. So let's return to our disaster example. Where did my evidence come from? I started with the obvious. The 9/11 attacks and Hurricane Katrina and Rita in 2005 forced the realization that disasters occur requiring the use of volunteers in addition to trained responders. And you look at what you have. You have DMATs, Disaster Medical Assistance Teams, the American Red Cross, and the Medical Reserve Corps. But what's missing from this picture? Who is missing, more importantly? Well, 34,000 people after Hurricane Katrina that called wanting to volunteer with virtually no training in disaster response. Emergency system for advanced registration of volunteer health professionals had been implemented, but it wasn't widely utilized or populated. There are federal, state, and local officials that have a list of volunteers, and there are states that sent people but were not in the disaster area. And then there are states that have well-functioning systems of volunteers. Those are some of the resources that are missing from that original triangle. And it is these resources that we needed to know how to tap into. With documents, there are many types of documents, so they should be categorized. First, if we're thinking about our volunteers issues, I would categorize them by liability concerns. In other words, are there legal documents? Then I would look for journal articles. Who, especially people who have responded and been on the ground, have written about what you do when you have a shortage of providers, or what you do when you need surge capacity. The second part was current systems of volunteer registrations. So there was a whole series of documents on state regulations, and 50 states probably have 50 different sets of regulations on how volunteers can be used. Professional association documents. Most professional associations have published documents on how to use volunteers, and they also have published documents that will relate to ethical responsibilities during a response, training requirements during a response, and other things that will impact whatever that professional category is. And in the case I was looking at, it was nurses. There are government websites that are excellent resources. Know where the government organizations archive old documents. And a lot of government agencies, the feds especially, will archive very old documents in the National Archives. So the National Archives and the Congressional Research Service, the GAO reports, are all excellent sources, and they are a category unto themselves. One of the things you will have to do is you'll have to gain access, and you're going to have to engage assistance. It is a process. Who do you know that can help you? Don't insist on meeting the top dog. And this is something that is really important. A lot of times, the top dog is going to be someone that is very, very busy. They're going to have little time to spend with you. And most likely, they're looking at the big picture, and they're not the one that's actually doing a lot of the work. So while they will have the big picture, they may not have read all of the background documents that exist. You want the person that can help you get the information you need. Make sure to get recommendations for other people that may be helpful, and if possible, ask for an introduction. Don't wear out your welcome. You may need to contact this person in the future. So when you go in to have a meeting with someone and you're asking them for information, be sure that you have written down the questions that you want, and when you have the answers you need, it's time to go. Try to be quick, try to be concise, and don't just hang around and take up time. And be prepared for the interview. Never, 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 never wing it. You need to go in with a structured interview and questions you're going to ask. You need to be flexible if the person takes you down another path. But what you don't want to do is look unprepared. Your credibility takes time to build, and it should never be compromised. You are not creating new knowledge here. Remember this. In a policy analysis, you are not doing research to create new knowledge. You're looking for the evidence that already exists. Your goal is to improve your understanding, and you want to find the truth. What you don't want to do is just go looking for the evidence that supports your current point of view. You need to find all the evidence, whether it supports you or not, because if you don't, what you're doing is not policy analysis. How do you protect your credibility? Well, it's all about relationships. Know the people who have a vested interest and give due attention to those that oppose any policy options. As much as it's important to have people in your corner, all the people in your corner supporting you cannot always overcome one determined person that is opposing you. So you need to know who those people are. Find the experts and quote them, either through personal communication or published articles. Rarely, as the policy analyst at a mid-level, does anybody want to know your opinion. What they want to know is the opinion of the people who are already considered the experts. Know political opponents and be prepared with arguments to counter their claims. This means you have to do some research in advance. You need to know who they are and what they think. You also need to be balanced. As the analyst, again, you are seeking truth. It is not your job to prove one side or the other. You need to lay out the evidence. Statistics help to support a claim, but statistics alone are not going to be good enough. They are not going to stand by themselves if you can't sell your policy. And then that leads to the fact that sometimes a good story that makes those statistics come alive for the decision makers is really important so they can sell it. You're always going to have some strategic dilemmas of policy research. You need to think about who you want to approach first and who you want to save till near the end. Some of the people that you want to approach first are those people that can help you search and provide useful information, the people that can help you get access to information. You really want access very early on to smart people and friendly experts, and it helps if those smart people are friendly experts. You want access to them because smart people around you will make you look smart, and experts will make sure that you don't say anything that's incorrect. And you also want early access to people who are going to be potential opponents, because this is going to be a long process. You're going to need to stay in contact with them. Things to avoid or put away for later are people who are hostile or defensive. If people are hostile and defensive, you may have to talk to them, but most likely they're just going to eat up your time and be a waste of your time, so avoid them. The person you may only get to see once needs to be near the end, because you want all of your ducks in a row before you go talk to them, and you want all of the evidence. You want to be able to fill in the gaps with this person. Again, if you can only talk to them once, you want them to be near the end. And then hoarders of information that don't want to share it. You are always going to run across these people who say information is power, and they perceive that they have power because they hoard the information and they don't want to give it to anybody. They will eat up a ton of your time and rarely be valuable because they aren't going to share information unless it's in their interest, and you're probably not going to be able to make it in their interest. So save them until last. If you have time to fool with them, okay at the end, but if you don't, skip it. So I think that this walks us through how we gather information and how we assemble the evidence. As a person who loves policy, I will tell you that relationships are everything. And being connected to smart, friendly people will always serve you well. So make friends where you can. Make sure that you are a good coworker and a good friend to them. When they need help or assistance, offer it. When they want you to share information, unless it's confidential information that you're not allowed to share, share it. The relationships you build early on will build your credibility, and they will serve you well throughout a policy career.